it's me, Mike, with HPDS. This video will be a reading and a study of Exodus chapter 39. That's Exodus chapter 39. And as usual, I will get started by reading the Lord's Prayer. And it reads, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So, Exodus 39, if you remember where we are, the last chapter, Exodus 38, was the outer furnishings. So remember, they've the story of Exodus, obviously, the children of Israel, Moses, burning bush, 10 plagues, they left, and there was the crossing of the Red Sea, and that's where, Pharaoh and the Egyptians, they were swallowed up there in the ocean there, and they died. And since then, they'd been wandering through the area there, and there were some things that happened, and they came upon Mount Sinai finally. And when they came upon Mount Sinai, they spent 40 days up there, followed by apparently another 40 days and perhaps longer. But they were there for a long time. They got the 10 commandments. Mount Sinai was on fire. They got instructions for the tabernacles. There was some idolaters there. And now they've been building the actual tabernacle for the past few chapters. As we end up this book of Exodus, there's this chapter 39, and then one more afterwards, chapter 40. And what's going to end up happening, obviously, is this chapter they're going to be completing the tabernacle. So let me go ahead and show you what's going on here. Exodus 39, they're completing the tabernacle. And what we're looking for in this chapter, we're going to see verse 1, the garments for the priests. And verses 2 through 4, we're going to read about the ephod. And 5 through 7, we're going to read about the girdle. Verses 8 through 21, we're going to read about the breastplate. Verses 22 through 26, the robe of the ephod. And then verses 27 through 28, the coats of fine linen and the mitre. Verse 29, we're going to read about the girdle. Verse 30 through 31, the plate of the holy crown. And to end the chapter out, verses 32 through 43, we're going to read about the tabernacle work completed. So yeah, that's what's going on, is the tabernacle work is being completed in this particular chapter. And like I said, last chapter were the outer furnishings, where they actually made the altar of burnt offerings. They made the brass laver. They made the whole court. Remember, if you remember the court, I have pictures in that chapter. You could go take a look at that video. And also there was the sum of the tabernacle offerings. Remember, there was a lot of, a ton of gold, over a ton of gold. I can't remember how many tons of gold and how many tons of silver and so forth. But it was all in that last chapter. There's some, it explains how much the offerings came out to, and it was a lot. It was a lot. So remember, this tabernacle is very finely built. It's built to last, and they do have it for a while throughout the rest of the Old Testament. Until they come across, until they build their, the temple and everything. But so yeah, that's Exodus 39, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll read through the chapter straight through, and then of course I'll come back and I'll reread it line by line, kind of going more in depth, and seeing what the Holy Spirit has to say about it. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started right now, and I will read Exodus 39 straight through. And remember, I read it out of the King James Version. And it reads, And of the blue and purple and scarlet they made clothes of service, to do service in the holy place, and made the holy garments for Aaron, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he made the ephod of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. And they did beat the gold into thin plates, and cut it into wires, to work it in the blue, and in the purple, and in the scarlet, and in the fine linen with cunning work. They made shoulder pieces for it. To couple it together by the two edges was it coupled together. And the curious girdle of his ephod that was upon it was the same, according to the work thereof, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen, as the Lord commanded Moses. And they wrought onyx stones enclosed in ouches of gold, graven as signets are graven with the names of the children of Israel. And he put them on the shoulders of the ephod, that they should be stones for memorial to the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he made the breastplate of cunning work, like the work of the ephod, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. It was foursquare that they made the breastplate double. A span was the length thereof, and a span the breadth thereof, being doubled. And they set in it 4 rows of stones. The first row was a sardius, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This was the first row. And the second row an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They were enclosed in ouches of gold in their enclosings. And the stones were according to the names of the children of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, every one with his name according to the 12 tribes. And they made upon the breastplate chains at the ends of wreathen work of pure gold. And they made 2 ouches of gold and 2 gold rings. And they put the 2 rings in the 2 ends of the breastplate. And they put the 2 wreathen chains of gold in the 2 rings of the ends of the breastplate. And the 2 ends of the 2 wreathen chains they fastened in the 2 ouches, and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod before it. And they made 2 rings of gold, and put them on the 2 ends of the breastplate, upon the border of it, which was on the side of the ephod inward. And they made 2 other golden rings, and put them on the 2 sides of the ephod underneath, toward the forepart of it, over against the other coupling thereof, above the curious girdle of the ephod. And they did bind the breastplate by his rings unto the rings of the ephod with a lace of blue, that it might be above the curious girdle of the ephod, and that the breastplate might not be loosed from the ephod, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he made the robe of the ephod of woven work of all blue. And there was an hole in the midst of the robe, as the hole of an habergeon, with a band round about the hole, that it should not rend. Excuse me. And they made upon the hems of the robe pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet, and twined linen. And they made bells of pure gold, and put the bells between the pomegranates upon the hem of the robe, round about between the pomegranates. A bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate, round about the hem of the robe, to minister in, as the Lord commanded Moses. And they made coats of fine linen of woven work for Aaron and his sons, and a meter of fine linen, and goodly bonnets of fine linen, and linen breeches of fine twined linen, and a girdle of fine twined linen, and blue, and purple, and scarlet of needlework, as the Lord commanded Moses. And they made the plate of the holy crown of pure gold, and wrote upon it a writing like to the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord. And they tied unto it a lace of blue, to fasten it on high upon the meter, as the Lord commanded Moses. Thus was all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation finished. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did they. And they brought the tabernacles unto Moses, the tent and all his furniture, with his taches, his boards, his bars, and his pillars, and his sockets. And the covering of ram skins dyed red, and the covering of badger skins, and the veil of the covering, the ark of the testimony, and the staves thereof, and the mercy seat, the table, and all the vessels thereof, and the showbread, the pure candlestick, with the lamps thereof, even with the lamps to be sent in order, and all the vessels thereof, and the oil for light, and the golden altar, and the anointing oil to the sweet incense, and the hanging for the tabernacle door, the brazen altar, and his grate of brass, his staves, and all his vessels, the laver and his foot, the hangings of the court, his pillars and his sockets, and the hanging for the court gate, his cords and his pins, and all the vessels of the service of the tabernacle for the tent of the congregation, the cloths of service to do service in the holy place, and the holy garments for Aaron the priest and his sons' garments to minister in the priest's office, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So the children of Israel made all the work. And Moses did look upon all the work, and behold, they had done it as the Lord had commanded. Even so had they done it, and Moses blessed them. So that is Exodus there, in Exodus 39 to be precise. And yeah, so what did we just read through? That's kind of been the longest chapter now for a while, for the past at least few chapters. This chapter was 43 verses, so it was a pretty long chapter, and it ultimately completes the work that the children of Israel have been doing now. So I'm just grabbing a few pictures here before I get going so I can show these pictures. Okay. Yeah, and what was I read? Let's see, because we read through in this chapter, we finally go through the garments that the Aaron and his sons will be wearing. So remember, Aaron is Moses' brother, and remember he was very instrumental in the early part of Exodus when they were talking with Pharaoh and them. And remember, Aaron was the one that was actually doing all the things for Moses, because Moses was. Remember, he didn't even want to go do it early on in Exodus. But so Aaron, though, he's a Levite, if we remember correctly, and he's the priestly family. So this is going to play out throughout throughout the Bible, and we got to keep that in mind. We're early on. Genesis is really important if you take this all into consideration. The sum of what's going on. Genesis 39 talked all about, not Genesis 39, but Genesis in general talked all about, all the way from Adam and Eve to Aaron. And then we really focused on Aaron and his bloodline after we, once we finally get to Aaron and his sons. And then Aaron had Aaron had some sons, and they had some sons, and we come up with Israel. So it's not very far. I think it's like his grandchildren or something like that. But anyway, those children ended up in Egypt because remember, Abraham started in, and I hope I've been saying Abraham. I don't know if I've been saying Aaron, but Abraham was the one that it started off. And remember, he started off all the way in I think it was Shinar. Remember, I think it was Shinar was what they called it, which was Babylon, way out there. And he walked all the way through the Holy Land, the land of the Canaanites at the time, which we know in today's modern world is Israel, which is a real country, really powerful, has a lot of say of what actually happens in this world. And of course, we know that because God Himself, if you read throughout the rest of the Bible, what He makes promises to Israel. Israel is His chosen country. His people. They were the ones that were given the law and the secrets, and they were the ones that ultimately have they rule the world. I'm just gonna say it like that. They're gonna rule the world. Jesus Christ as their Messiah, their King, that comes from these lines that we're currently reading about. And so remember, Levi. Let's see, what is the Spirit trying to get at? Ultimately, just remember that these bloodlines are important, and they come from Genesis, where Genesis, especially at the end of the book of Genesis, when Israel is actually out there with his son Joseph after Joseph becomes Pharaoh, and then they're in Egypt all that time later, and that's where Exodus picks up on. And now it's several, remember it's something like 430 years after they actually got out, when they to the day. Remember, it was 430 years to the day that when they got into Egypt that they left Egypt. So that's God was keeping track, and they were supposed to be. They had a covenant with God, and they were not. They were not honoring their covenants, and that's why even early on in the book of Exodus, remember Moses. God came to kill Moses, and his wife has to save him by realizing that their child hadn't been circumcised, and so she circumcised their children, and that's what saved Moses' life, because they weren't honoring the covenant to God. And so this is God really correcting, he's really making them his people. He came to show them in full force. Remember, probably not in full force, but he came out and it was very intense. This whole situation has been very intense. The whole mountain was on fire. Remember that. There was hail, a hailstorm that was, unparalleled. There was fire that was in the sky. Remember, that was these were things that, remember, Abraham had seen the Sodom and Gomorrah when fire, fire rained down into Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed the cities. So Abraham saw the power of God, and now Moses and all of these children of Israel. And remember, there was 600 and something thousand men alone. And these are the men that were able to be counted from their age 20 and above. And so the women and the children, this was over 1 million people. This had to be over 1 million people that left. So there were 1 million people that saw this intense, like I said, forces of nature, that I would call it, that most people would call it. But so that's what's going on in this chapter. Remember, this is the end, and this is the clothing for the priests, which is, Levi, that, God is really setting up his kingdom. He set them up in Egypt, but this is him really going to set them up in their homeland that they're going to actually inherit, which, remember, is going to be the land. Ultimately, remember, we read about Melchizedek back in Genesis, and he was, in Shalom, as they called it, and that was pretty much the area that was going to be Jerusalem. And so obviously God, he was with his people, and he's showing his powers, that clearly he's got strange powers. And remember, Moses was trying to look for a man or a creature or something, and so that's why God even said he was going to show himself, but he wasn't going to let him see his face, just his back parts and all, and so Moses has seen all of these things, and like I say, we would call them what some people want to call just natural phenomenon, but God is showing that he has power over natural phenomenon. He makes it rain, he makes it hail, he can make people just die for no reason, he can make water turn into blood, he could make animals come to his beckoning, his animals come. And so remember, he has powers. And Moses and these people know it, and that's why we're here, and they're building this clothing for their priests, which is going to be like their government. Remember, these are going to be their government official type. Everybody's going to need to come when they break the law. They're going to need to come sacrifice to these people, and so that's going to be just remember that's what's kind of going on here. And that's why this clothing and this tabernacle, keep in mind, is real expensive and real nice and real finely built. And if you understand it for what it is, it's the makings of their legal system. You can look around in modern world and see how lawyers are dressed, and how judges are dressed, and how these people, how much money they spend on their clothing, and how much their buildings are worth, and how much you just go to a courthouse, and some of these courthouses are gigantic in these big cities. They're finely made mason structures and so forth. The masons usually put the Grand Mason seal out there saying that this is finely mason built. fine mason work. So just keep that in mind, that this is what is going on. And I think that's really what the Spirit wants to point out there as this work on the tabernacle is being completed. Because it's coming to an end. So let me go ahead and get this started, and I will read through Exodus 39 one more time, line by line, and hopefully we could get through it a little quick. This is a pretty long chapter. Let's see. And because a lot of this, like I said, is just the clothing, and I've got pictures, and the pictures seem to suffice, because unless we're recreating it, the pictures are pretty in depth enough. So let me go ahead and get this set up and make sure I got this. Yes. Okay. And it reads, "And of the blue and purple and scarlet they made clothes of service to do service in the holy place, and made the holy garments for Aaron, as the Lord commanded Moses." So remember, that's what I'm getting at. The Aaron is basically the head of the government ultimately, and Moses is like something else. And remember, we read that earlier in Exodus. I'm not entirely sure what chapter, but it had to be chapter 4 or something along those lines. Moses didn't want to do this, so the Lord appointed Aaron as Moses' spokesman back in, I'm looking at it, Exodus 4, 10 through 17. So at that point, Moses didn't want to do it. He said, send somebody else. God got mad with him and said, you know what, I'm going to make Aaron as your spokesman or something like that. And he said, you will be like God to the people, and Aaron will be your prophet. Remember, he said something along those lines. So Moses was pretty much, these people saw him as a god almost. So it was really intense for them. Remember, his face at this point, I've already forgotten to mention that his face was shining by the end of all of this. For some reason, his face was shining, and it was obvious, and he had to wear some sort of a face covering over his face. Remember that. And he made the ephod of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. So an ephod is this covering. So I got some pictures here. Here's one of them. So this is ultimately the ephod and the garments that, this is what he would have been wearing. Something along these lines. These other pictures maybe depicted a little bit differently. Maybe, this one's kind of this way looks one. And let me see another picture I've got a few of these pictures. These two more match up. It looks like it's almost the same picture, basically. And then this one kind of matches up with that one. And I know I've shown these before in previous chapters when I read over them. You can see Exodus 28. Exodus 28 is when I would have shown pretty much these pictures. But these are the garments in the ephod that we're reading about, that we read about. And he's got real nice, these stones, and they're real nice engravings. Remember up here too, he's got on these shoulder pad type deals. They're really nice. See, 2 onyx stones, and engraved them. He engraved all the names of Israel. Remember, there was 12 names, 12 children of Israel. They're all named back in Genesis, at the end of Genesis. I want to say Genesis 49, Genesis 50. There's something important where it lists all their names and everything. But yeah, so these are the clothing. There's going to be a few pieces of clothing. There's this turban, this headpiece, and then the tunic, and so that's what we're reading about. So he made the ephod of gold, blue, and purple, scarlet. Remember, those are the colors. Obviously, you see those colors. And it was fine twined linen. And I've been mentioning this through the past few chapters, is remember, this is something like 4,000 years ago, nearly. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something like 4,000 years ago, or 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And they were, they knew how to make linen cloth. And linen, remember, comes from flax, and you got to break it and do a few things to it. And you got to really know what you're doing, and then you have to twine it, and then you can make cloth out of it. And this is still pretty difficult. And I would say the modern person, the average person, wouldn't even know how to make linen. You know how to buy it, but you wouldn't know how to make it, and you probably the equipment to make it is kind of expensive and kind of specialized, so you're not gonna really just find the machines that you need to you know twine linen and make it into cloths, and you'd have to buy it from some specialty stores. Is what I'm getting at, and they were doing it though. So these people knew how to do it, and they knew how to make the colors and everything, and they knew how to make it. I pressed the wrong button. They knew how to make it intricate, and remember, look at all the intricacies that they were able to make. Different colors, different materials. They were putting in pictures, of the in the curtains for the tabernacle, for example. And look at this. They did beat the gold into thin plates and cut it into wires to work it in the blue and in the purple and in the scarlet and in the fine linen with cunning work. See? So they were making gold thin plates and making it into wires. So they knew how to mess with gold and these metals. So they were also doing smelting and blacksmith work. So this is not, even in today's world, once again, it's dangerous. That you gotta have a lot of heat. And you got to have the tools to pick up all this heat, these hot metal pieces and so forth. And even with the gold, you need to know a little bit about chemistry too to get the higher quality gold, for example. And you need to know about acids and so forth and how that works. But they made shoulder pieces for it to couple it together by the two edges as it was coupled together. And the curious girdle of his ephod that was upon it was of the same, according to the work thereof, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen, as the Lord commanded Moses. So yeah, I just want to point that out, that's what they're saying. It's really, look at this. They kind of made this front piece and the back piece, and they made these shoulder connectors, and they connected it there. And they made gold wirings. Look at, you can see the gold chains right here that they talk about. And they wrought onyx stones enclosed in ouches of gold, graven as signets were graven with the names of the children of Israel. So remember, that's what they're doing. They're getting these onyx. So these are precious stones right here. And onyx, if you've seen it, it's real nice. All these stones are really nice. I mean, I'm not gonna take the time to Google them or anything, but I kind of have a feeling I want to, but go ahead, and if you're watching this, just take some time and Google these stones, because these stones are very precious. And again, this is something they had to know how to work with. So to make these, you gotta, you gotta know how to find them in the dirt. You gotta know how to clean them up. You need to know how to cut them and how to shape them and how to make them shiny and all that stuff. So they knew how to work all this stuff too. And it was 4,000, something like 4,000 years ago. And these are things that they did that we want to call, some people want to call these fairy tales and stuff. So I don't know what these people are thinking, but these people right here, this writing was a long time ago. People have preserved this historical record for a very long time now. They've preserved it very well. And these are, like I said, historical records by the government. Moses was the head of the government. He was like God. Remember, that's what it was. The people saw him as something magical, something sacred and spiritual, and he was something special. He commanded the weather. Remember, that's during the 10 plagues. They saw him command these things. They saw him turn water from the stone and everything. And they saw him do a lot of things, and he told them that it was all because of God. And they even saw him go up that mountain that was on fire and everything, and he still went up there, and he was fine. But everybody else, remember, nobody else could go up there or they were to be killed. But Moses was able to go up there, and it was something, they saw him as some sort of a god. And so these are the records, and so they're showing you that, look, this is the stuff that we could do, and they're setting the framework for, they're not dumb, they're very smart, they're very intelligent, because this is not easy things to do. And he put them on the shoulders of the ephod, that they should be stones for memorial to the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses. So this is, like I said, those stones in particular that he's talking about are these stones, the onyx stones placed upon the clods. So you see, they're think about it, how big they had to be. Maybe a few inches, 5-6 inches, maybe, pretty big. If that being pretty big, I don't know, maybe they were bigger, but maybe they were smaller. But they had the engravings of all the names. It's 12 names of the children of Israel. Remember. Which are the 12 tribes. And he put them on the shoulders. Let's see, I think I read that. Yeah. And he made the breastplate of cunning work, like the work of the ephod, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. Let's see, where am I at? 5 through 7 was the girdle, and 8 through 21 the breastplate. So 8 through 21 we're reading about the breastplate. So yep, this is the breastplate. And let's see, let's look at the picture of the breastplate one more time. Picture's not too bad. Kind of gives the stones. You see, there's this framework, this of 12 more stones, precious. They're connected. They're held up. I think there's a bunch of gold. There's all nice gold, all interwoven. So it's something real nice. It's all a memorial to the 12 tribes. Remember, this is basically like the government. This is what we would think of as like the government and its states. So, and I'm in the United States of America, so the way I think of it, just the way, logically speaking, he's got the country of Israel, and it has 12 states, which is, there's actually 11 states, to be honest. There was 11 states that were given portion lands, and then there's the children of Levi that are given the cities in their lands. So they were given the sanctuary cities within the borders of these other countries. So, I mean, the other states. So you have the states, and then you've got the Levites, which were the main government, which are the priests. They had cities in all of the states. They had several cities in every state that they controlled and that they ran, and that was theirs. And the states, which are the other tribes, they got to basically run themselves according to however God told them, however God commanded them and so forth. And they were all to make, remember, every year they were supposed to have several get-togethers, several feasts, 3 of them, that they were all come together, and they were supposed to all meet together and make their sacrifices. And remember, that's kind of how their government is working. So keep that in mind. This is the government placed upon them by God, that they've got these states, these governors, these priests that run a lot of things, and everybody has to go to them to pay their, to talk to God, basically. and that's what's going on. And this guy Aaron is wearing these garments, and that's what all this is kind of signifying. Their people, their states, their heritage. They're a memorial. Remember that. And so let's see. So the breastplate of cunning work, like the work of the ephod, of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. It was 4 square. They made the breastplate double. A span was the length thereof, and a span the breadth thereof, being doubled. So 4 squares, so just a square. And they set it in 4 rows of stones. The first row was a sardius, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This was the first row. And the second row, an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row, a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They were enclosed in ouches of gold in their enclosings. Yeah, so that's, remember, keep that in mind. That's these stones are, let's see. These stones, you can kind of see them pretty good right here. 4 rows of 3 stones, all of them a precious stone, all of them having the name on it. Remember that. Let's see. And the stones were according to the names of the children of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, everyone with his name, according to the 12 tribes. And they made upon the breastplate chains at the ends of wreathen work of pure gold. Let's see. They made upon the breastplate chains at the ends. So that would be, and they made 2 ouches of gold and 2 gold rings, and put the 2 rings in the 2 ends of the breastplate. So keep that in mind. That's these right here. You can see it. These they're connecting these chains at the ends, chains, and they connect. And they made 2 ouches and put the 2 rings on the 2 ends of the breastplate. And they put the 2 wreathen chains of gold in the 2 rings on the ends of the breastplate. And the 2 ends of the wreathen chains they fastened in the 2 ouches and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod before it. And so remember, that's the shoulder piece parts. You can see them. They go to here. Bam, bam. That's what it's talking about. These, and then also these that kind of did something else. And these chains. So they're gold chains. Keep that in mind. Very, like I said, they're kind of, I don't know how to make these personally myself. I've never made anything like that personally myself. I could say I've seen it, but I've never done it. And so these people, remember, they had a few guys that were in charge of all this stuff, and they were teaching other people how to do it. And so they were doing this they did this for the sons too. And they made, toward the forepart of it, and they made 2 other golden rings and put them on the sides of the ephod underneath toward the forepart, over against the other coupling above the. Like I said, these are it's really kind of specific. They weren't messing around. They were telling you how they did all this. And they did bind the breastplate by his rings unto the rings of the ephod with the lace of blue, that it might be above the curious girdle of the ephod, and that the breastplate might not be loosed from the ephod, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he made the robe of the ephod of woven work of all blue. Okay, so now we're getting into verses 23 to 26, which are the robe of the ephod. So now we're looking at the robe. And he made the robe of woven work of all blue. So that's what this robe is. You can see that underneath. So this was the ephod. And this was the ephod, which is this kind of goes around the shoulder piece, goes around the shoulder and around the back, kind of like an apron looking thing. And then this was the breastplate, which was on top of the ephod. And then remember, the shoulder pads were the shoulder straps connected the front to the back of the ephod. And then now we're talking about these robes, which are these blue things that he wore underneath that. And it was all blue. And there was an hole in the midst of the robe as the hole of a habergeon, with a band round about the hole, that it should not rend. And I think I remember it was, I forget what a habergeon is, but it's a piece of like armor or something like that. And so what it's talking about, that it had the neck piece, and then it had a band round about the hole so that it should not rend meaning tear. So it's basically saying it was reinforced like an armor piece. You see this? I guess that's kind of what this looks like. And so it's really saying that, and I remember making mention of it back in chapter, I think it was 28 of Exodus, saying that this is notice what it is. He's making it like an armor, and keep that in mind. It's even got a breastplate. So this clothing is, even though it's for the priests, it's definitely kind of militant in its design. And this is really kind of pointing that out, is that it's around the neckband, it's reinforced. So this is meant to be not torn. So this is also clothing that's meant to last for a long time. And they made upon the hems of the robe pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet and twine linen. So that's on the hems of the robe, which is, kind of the bottom, the hem. And they put pomegranates, blue, purple. So they put these little kind of stones on them. And maybe this one shows them a little bit better. I can't really. Here they are, the pomegranates around the hem. Make pomegranates. So they got these little. They're being very specific in how this robe looked. See, they'd had these things at the bottom, these frames of these bells and stuff, and a bell and a pomegranate, and a bell and a pomegranate round about the hem of the robe to minister in, as the Lord commanded Moses. So remember, it's very specific that this is how he made it. And they made coats of fine linen of woven work for Aaron and his sons. So they also made the coats of fine linen for Aaron and his sons. So this was the high priest, but all the other kids got coats of fine linen. Remember that. and the meter of fine linen, and goodly bonnets of fine linen. So let me see, 27 to 28, the coats of fine linen and the meter. So a meter of fine linen and goodly bonnets, and so the bonnets, that's, so this is the kind of clothing that all the sons are getting, and linen breeches, the linen breeches, which are the pants basically, and the girdle of fine twined linen and blue and purple and scarlet and of needlework, as the Lord commanded Moses. So theirs kind of looks the same, but it doesn't look like they've got this ephod on top of it. They get breeches and underneath, and they get the blue and purple. Let's see, right? The blue and purple and scarlet, a girdle of that, and they get the meter. The meter is this headpiece right here, the headpiece and the goodly bonnets. So you see, they're getting the clothing too, for the most part, but they're not getting the ephod, is what it really looks like there is going on here. But they're still getting it. You know what I mean? They're all the priests, and there's a high priest as well. And so moving on, let's see. 29 is the girdle. So the girdle of fine twined linen. So that's like a belt kind of a deal. And they made the plate in verse, let's see, 30 to 31, the plate of the holy crown. And they made the plate of the holy crown of pure gold, and wrote upon it a writing like the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord. Wow. So they made the plate of the holy crown, and that's what they wrote on it, holiness to the Lord. And I guess that's what's written on the top up here. Right here. That's what this is. You see that crown looking thing? And it said holiness to the Lord. So this was the high priest had that. And they tied unto it a lace of blue to fasten it high upon the meter being the hat, as the Lord commanded Moses. So yeah, thus was all the work of the tabernacle. So at the end of it, 32 to 43, the tabernacle work completed. So yeah, the rest of this chapter, like I said, is just talking about that has been, this chapter talked about this piece of clothing right here. And so keep in mind, this was for Aaron. Had the high, but the children also had something like this. The sons, they had like the blue kind of. They had this girdle which kind of went around their belt, and they had some kind of pieces of linen and pants that kind of did this, and they also had some bonnets and hats and stuff too. They just really didn't have this ephod, which was this, like I said, nice gold, nice stones. This would be it would be a very fine piece of clothing even in today's world, and it'd be very valuable because every one of those stones are valuable stones, and these were stones that were had engravings, and they were gold all around them. So yeah, it was a very expensive piece of clothing for the high priest. Keep that in mind. And like I said, they're basically like the leaders of the government, nearly, or at least officials of the government. Keep that in mind. That's what this clothing is all about. But yeah, the end of this chapter, like I said, chapter 32 to 43. And thus was all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation finished. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did they. So everything. And they brought the tabernacle unto Moses, the tent, and all his furnitures, his taches, his boards, his bars, and his pillars, and his sockets. So let's look at the rest of this too. Keep that in mind, that ultimately this is what they built. They built, here's the courtyard, here's the tent, and you can see kind of the boards that were in the linens, and then they had the pieces of the furniture on the outside. Let's see, you can see the inside and the outside furnishings. So all these furnishings, so all of this, and then of course all the clothing that we just talked about. That's what they're talking about right here. And the covering of ram skins dyed red, and the covering of badger skins, and the veil of the covering. Remember, there was even all of that's on top of the tent. You can see that all right here. This is what the tabernacle looked like. It was a really intense. It's a lavish tent. It's a tent with wood that was covered in gold and using like silver to connect them and all that. It's a with all kinds of gold furnishings. Ultimately, that's what it was. It's with nice linens. the ark of the testimony and the staves thereof, and the mercy seat. Remember, the mercy seat was completely gold. And it was gold, like what, 2 feet by 2 feet or something like that. And the table and all the vessels thereof, and the showbread, the pure candlestick with the lamps thereof, even with the lamps to be set in order, and all the vessels thereof, and the oil for light. Remember, so this was a lot of things, a lot of value. They were all bringing this. It was all done in the golden altar, and the anointing oil, and the sweet incense, and the hanging for the tabernacle doors. This is the let's see, the brazen out. These are the inside furnishings right here, and then right here, these are the outdoor. The brazen altar and his grates of brass, his staves and all his vessels, the laver and his foot, the hangings of the court, his pillars and his sockets, and the hanging for the court gate, his cords and the pins, and all the vessels of the service of the tabernacle for the tent of the congregation. So that's all the stuff. Remember that they needed, that they built this with. There's the tent. It's insides, it's outsides. It's kind of like a fence made out of cloth, with nice linen, gold, silver, all kinds of. That's how it was. That's how they made it. The cloths of service, which is what was pretty much at the beginning of this chapter, and the holy garments for Aaron the priest and his sons' garments to minister in the priest's office, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So the children of Israel made all the work. And Moses did look upon all the work, and behold, they had done it as the Lord had commanded. Even so had they done it, and Moses blessed them. So yeah, that it's. I find that like this is a pretty intense moment. I feel like, because this is the end of chapter 39. We got one more chapter, but this is the work has been completed here in Exodus, and it's incredible. This is a very magnificent structure that they've created, with all these furnishings, with even this clothing. All of it's in 4,000 years ago, just about 3,500 years ago is what I want to say. The real number might be 35, but I really don't know, and people talk about it a lot. They want to mess with the numbers, so I don't really know, but it's something like that. So I just go with 4,000 years ago, and they were able to make cloth out of linen. They were able to dye it. They were able to smelt gold, smelt silver, smelt bronze. They were able to make pins, and so pins and nails, and I'm sure there some sort of hardware to connect these pieces of wood. So they were able to do that, and they were able to make coverings, giant coverings that they were able to connect together to put over this tent. And this tent was made of boards with nice gold and connected with those pieces of hardware. And there was a big old candlestick that was completely made out of gold, very heavy, something like 75 pounds of gold or something is what I think it was what I remember. So, and just incredible that they made this, and they did it out there in out in what we would consider just out in nature. They were just out there, out in the woods, out in the plains, or off this mountain, just around this mountain. They were just out there, out in the wild. That's what I would say. I guess they were out in the wild, and they did this. And it was a long time ago, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's something that people may not be able to. You could probably take 1 million Americans today in a terrible situation, kind of an apocalyptic situation, and take 1 million Americans today and without God, and they would probably, I know without God, they would definitely fail. They wouldn't know what to do. They would fall into anarchy. They would kill each other and fight for, that's what all our movies are about. If you watch all our movies, that's what the Americans, they just fall into chaos and kill each other, and they're gone. They can't save themselves, and there's always just the little shelter at the end. If you make it to the shelter, but you always realize there's something wrong with the shelter. You're never supposed to go to the shelter. But anyway, point of the matter is, that's what we envision. Something like that happened to us. We had to flee Egypt as an American society with like 1 million people. They would fall into chaos. They'd kill each other, and that's what our movies are kind of about. They'd fight, and it'd just be absolute chaos. These people came together and built a magnificent structure with magnificent pieces of furniture, with magnificent clothing for their officials. And they made a government with the help of the Lord. They became the Lord's people, and this is what he did for them. He told them what to do, and he showed them who he was, and just out of awe and reverence, they did it. Just out of awe and reverence to the Lord. And that's what this chapter kind of, like I said, signifies. That's what happened here in this chapter. And in the last chapter, the next chapter, it's basically the Lord is going to show up, and he's going to make it his tabernacle officially, I guess you could say. So, because remember, that's the whole point of this tabernacle, is he said he would dwell with them. But remember also, because they worshipped the false idol, remember God said he wasn't going to go with them personally. Remember, he was showing up as the a pillar in the sky, a pillar of fire by night, and a cloud pillar by day. And remember, they saw him, and he was incredible forces of nature. But then they were, they were scared, I believe. Let's see. That was already Exodus, I believe, when they were talking about. Well, anyway, the point of the matter is, they since they worshiped the false idol, remember the golden calf, God said he wasn't going to go with them anymore. Remember, Moses pledged, go with us, or else why are we going to do this at all? And God told him, I'm going to send an angel, an angel ahead of you. And that's what so remember, he was coming up as these powerful forces of nature, and they were very scared. And remember, they were still scared. So they out of their fear, they worshiped someone else. They actually thought, some of these people actually thought, you know what? Let's serve something else other than this powerful God that we're bearing witness to. Let's go, maybe somebody, just a calf, something I could take advantage of real easily. I don't have to worry about being killed by this piece of gold statue that I could come to instead. But I don't know what their thought process or what, but the point of the matter is, because they did that, God was angry with them, and he wasn't going to go with them in their as his glorious kind of force of nature. Instead, he's going to come real quietly, real silent, real small inside to this seat of mercy seat. Remember, and it's just a couple of feet by a couple of feet. Yeah, it's made out of gold, but it's back there in this dark room in the back, covered, a tent that's covered, dark. There's just a lamp outside that's giving light. You come in here, and it's got to be dark, pretty dark inside that holy of holy places, and it's a real small area, but that's where God was going to be, instead of showing up as terrifying forces of nature that they were very afraid of. And that's why they were letting Moses do all the talking. Remember, the elders of Israel didn't want to talk to God. They just said, you go talk to him and come tell us. And so that's kind of what happened there. But anyway, that is Exodus 39 in its entirety. I'm going to go ahead and end the video right here. And I'll go ahead and do as I normally do. And I'll say that God bless whoever may be watching this. If you like what I'm doing, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future chapter by chapter Bible study. And I pray we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.